Yo, 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 what it is, what it was, what's it gonna be? Welcome
Welcome.
to the latest episode of the Gen Expertise Podcast, episode 28. Say it loud! Big Facts Part 2. We are your hosts and rants, and
Welcome.
welcome to the 37th chamber.
The 30.
I feel like I should be saying snow, 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 man. It's snowing so much over here, it's crazy.
Oh yeah, y'all about to get buried. You said it's
we
about to be 2 feet there, right?
buried. Yeah, they talk about a possibility of 2 feet.
Yeah, I saw in the news that there's a travel ban, and I never seen that before in New York. A travel ban. I've seen
Yeah.
delays. I've seen public transportation shut down for a little while, but I've never seen a travel ban in New York.
Yeah, it's gonna be nuts.
So that shows you how serious this is gonna be.
Yeah,
So
it's crazy. A school day, the kids get an old school snow day.
old school snow day. Not a
Snow-
delay, not a remote, not remote
Nope.
school. They're just off.
They don't have to look at the bottom of the screen tomorrow at the news or see disclosures. They like, let's get it out the way early.
Does anybody still do that? You don't have to do that anymore, right? Like you get an alert or something, right? Like if the school's gonna be closed or if there's a delay.
I'm not sure. I do think that
'Cause I
there's
think that's old
in
school.
some counties. I don't think it's in the city anymore. I think they just tell you right off the bat.
Yeah,
Especially
I feel
now.
like most systems are gonna have alerting like to your phone or something, or like some app that tells you, hey, don't come in tomorrow or something like that, right?
Yeah,
But when
everything's
we were
an app
kids,
now.
you had to look at you had to just keep looking at the bottom of your screen and be dressed and ready with your backpack.
Yeah, that was the craziest thing about it, that you had to literally be in your clothes and ready to go to school just in case.
Yeah, just looking at the bottom of the screen.
Man, since we're from the city so nice, they named it twice. It's only right we do a second episode for Black History Month. And also because Black History Month is the shortest month of the year, only right that we double down.
Agreed. Okay.
So, we have some more examples of Black excellence that we care to share with you guys on this episode of our Big Facts Part 2. You know how we do. We go back and forth and back on a couple of examples. So, after this, I got to run right outside and start shoveling, bro. So, time is of essence.
Yeah, this is real life here.
This is real life in, son. So what you got up first for us?
So, first of all, before we get started, since we're talking about Black History Month, I definitely wanted to say a rest in peace to Jesse Jackson.
Rainbow
and
Coalition.
I'm aware, the Rainbow Coalition, Operation Push, People United to Save Humanity.
And the presidency run too, right?
Yeah, a couple of presidency runs.
Yeah,
a couple of times actually. So, yeah, I mean, and I know that Jesse Jackson, for a number of reasons, and to different people, he means different things, right? Like he might be kind of a polarizing figure to some folks, but one thing that we can't deny is that he is a very kind of relevant and present figure in the civil rights movement, from kind of standing right next to Martin Luther King, literally and figuratively, during the 60s. All the way up until present day, like until he passed away, right? He was always in the public eye as kind of a symbol for civil rights, a symbol for kind of the unity of the served communities, no matter what color, thus that Rainbow Coalition that he formed. But I just wanted to say that I'm not going to say too much about it because I know that it's kind of it's polarizing, right? Like and for reasons that we don't have to get into, but still, there's certain parts of his career and the presence that he had and what he fought for that we can't deny or just ignore, right? So for that reason, I just want to pay my respect and say R.I.P. to Jesse Jackson on the show.
R.I.P. to the Reverend Jesse Jackson. My grandmother had those Rainbow Coalition buttons back in the day, in the 80s, yo.
And as a kid, like as a Gen Xer, like you kind of growing up with Jesse Jackson as a public figure, this whole idea of keeping hope alive and the idea that you are somebody, like his kind of call and response speeches, that resonated with us as young people, right? At a time where we needed that. So that's another reason why I feel like it's only right that we, at least pay some respect. For this episode, like I did a lot of research, man, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And when I say a lot, I mean a lot in a little bit of time. I had to, like condense a lot of
Yeah.
research into a small amount of time. And I want to give somebody a shout out too before I even get into this, because there's a person that a friend of mine that listens to us all the time. Her name is Shamika Rivera, and she actually
Oh.
suggested this to me. She suggested this actual topic to me maybe last week sometime. She said that this would be a good topic to discuss for Black History Month. And it's coincidental that we're doing a part 2 to our Black History Month, tribute. So this is about the Freedom House ambulance service out of Pittsburgh. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, Rance, but in the 1960s, there was no ambulance service. At least up until the mid 60s, there was no ambulance. Like, let's say somebody got hurt in their home, or somebody had like a cardiac event or something like that in the home. You know what they'd have to do?
You have to carry you to the hospital the best way you could.
Yeah, I mean,
Hope your family goes to the
actually,
gym.
yes. Actually, yes, but they were really dependent on two particular kind of groups, right? Like they were, you either had to call the funeral home or you had to call the police, right? Because the police had a van, and they could pick up, a person that's in distress and take them to the hospital, right? Or you call a funeral home if you kind of had this feeling like, wow, this person may not make it. You're probably more likely to call the funeral home because they have vehicles that could accommodate a body, right? So those were the two organizations that you could call in the 60s. And I never gave this, I would say I just never gave this much thought, man, because you take for granted that the way things are, the services that you're getting today are pretty much the way things have been for a long, long time, right? When you think about it, in the 60s, there was no 911. There was no ambulance service, really, like not a formal one. And then if you think about the 60s, especially for Black people, to call the police in kind of an emergency situation, that wasn't always the easiest thing, right? Because in Pittsburgh in 1966 in particular, where this story kind of starts to unfold, if you think about that time period, there's kind of a contentious relationship between the community and the police, right? Because that's a time where race relations are not the best. Talking about 1966. And so calling the police, people probably hesitant, right? And then if you did have to call the police, if you had no choice and they picked up a Black person that's in distress, they didn't always have any mechanism to help them out, right? There was no emergency care, right? So they would just try to get you to the hospital the best they could. And sometimes people would die on the way, or people would die in the whole process. They said in 1966, they were saying you had a better chance of surviving a bullet wound in Vietnam than you had in the housing project in Pittsburgh, right?
That's crazy.
And the funny thing is that, not the funny thing, but the craziest thing about it to me was that this was the case for everybody across the country, right? Like, this wasn't just the case in Black neighborhoods. Of course, like, underserved neighborhoods probably had it like much worse. And like I said, the relationship between a Black community and the police wasn't the best at the time. So you can just imagine how scary it was if somebody did have some sort of emergency, or if somebody, God forbid, somebody was a victim of some sort of violence. You don't know what's going to happen at that time, right? So what happened was the NAACP at the time appointed James McCoy to just kind of do something about the disparities that were happening between the Black community and their white counterparts, right? They wanted them to do investigation. They started the Freedom House enterprise in Pittsburgh, just to do stuff like investigate, just to do things like find out if there's any way they could do public outreach. And what they came up with is, with the help of Peter Saffer. Peter Saffer was actually a white physician who's known as the father of CPR. Now, he's from Pittsburgh. And he realized that there was a need for this, especially in the Black community. There's a need for kind of before hospital care, right? So he decided that he was going to start a program where he trained members of the community to become basically what we know now as paramedics. And this was the first of its kind, right? Like, so he started a multi-week program. I think it's like a 32-week program where they would learn about the body. They would learn stuff like anatomy. They would learn CPR. They would learn all sorts of emergency care techniques. They would learn how to set up an IV. They learned how to do electric shock to, to restart a heart, all the way into like, eventually they would do the first intubation in the street. I don't know if you know what intubation is, but it's basically when someone can't breathe, if there's some blockage or they have some problem breathing, sometimes you have to actually cut a hole in their
To clear the
trachea and put
throat,
a
the
tube in,
trachea hole.
right? So you could breathe, so actually they can breathe. So you can let air into the trachea if they can't breathe on their own. So this is just like something I wasn't aware of, right? Like I feel like I had heard this in passing, but I never knew the detail about it. And the details are fascinating because I didn't know that the first paramedics were actually a group of Black men out of Pittsburgh. And one of the other unique aspects of this was that when they selected people for this program, they were selecting people as sort of it was almost like a second chance type of program, right? Like where
Okay.
they were hiring people that were previously thought unhireable, right? Quote unquote. So people, due to kind of lack of education or even having a criminal record or criminal background, some of these folks were considered unhireable. If you think about this in the 60s and you think about physicians coming to Pittsburgh or coming to this Hill district in Pittsburgh and taking a group of Black men and deciding that these men could be taught how to basically become like, those guys are mobile nurses, right?
Yes.
They're learning as much as the nurse needs to know when they come to emergency. They're learning all of that stuff, but they're basically doing it in the street and they're doing it on wheels. So this lasted from 1967 to 1975, actually, the Freedom House Ambulance Service, right? And they started out serving the Hill District in Pittsburgh, which is the predominantly Black area in Pittsburgh. And then eventually, other folks got word of this, like other neighborhoods, other demographics started to ask why, the percentage chance of somebody surviving when having an emergency and using these folks, that percentage chance would be much higher than probably not only across Pittsburgh, but across the rest of the country, right? Because the outcomes were the same no matter what, because there was no, like I said, there was no paramedics, there was no EMS, and there was no kind of emergency before hospital care before this program. So this ended in 1975, and it ended because a new mayor came into town. His name was Peter Flaherty. He didn't really like the fact that he didn't have control over this Freedom House ambulance service because they had a contract with the city, but he didn't really have any control over it. So he wanted to end it. So they actually had to disband, and Peter Flaherty started a Pittsburgh EMS, right? And most of what the EMS did was copy. They were just copying the blueprint
Copy,
from,
cut, and paste.
yeah, they were just basically
Mhm.
taking the blueprint from the Freedom House ambulance service. And one of the deals that was made was that they would hire people from the Freedom House ambulance service when they started the EMS, right? But you could probably guess how that turned out because
Yeah.
being that these are a bunch of Black men, one of the rules was there was no if you had a criminal record, you couldn't be part of the EMS, right? So that automatically cut out some of the folks that were part of the original program, even though they were trained, they were professional, they had gone through the training with physicians, they knew what they were doing basically, and they were the first to ever do it. If you think about it, they were the blueprint for the idea of being a paramedic, the idea of having this EMS, the idea
Wow.
of having emergency care on wheels. They had an average of a 10-minute response time. So
Wow. That's
yeah,
fast
man,
because it's all about time.
yeah, exactly. Like the
That's
faster you can
crazy.
get, the faster you intervene, the higher percentage chance of success, or, in saving a life, right? So if you think about that, these guys became godsend for the community, right? And their techniques were being used after a while across the country because after a while they had a medical director. Her name was Nancy C. Caroline, actually, medical director, and her book on paramedics became kind of the seminal work and what what all paramedics would go on to follow, because she wrote the book on what a paramedic should actually be. She joined them as the medical director, like somewhere between, I think it was like around 1972 or so. The first intubation to be done in the street, she gave the direction to do it. A gentleman, I think his name was John Moon. He joined the Freedom House ambulance service in 1972, actually. And there was a case where a gentleman was having a hard time breathing. He called in to see what Nancy directed, what Nancy's advice or suggestion might be for this. And she told him to intubate the patient. And he says that he thought she had lost her mind because
Yeah.
nobody had ever done an intubation outside of the hospital. This is a procedure that is designed to be done in a closed setting like a hospital, right? So he did it. He administered an IV just as she suggested, and they wound up saving the patient's life. Right? Fast forward to 1975, and the Pittsburgh EMS was formed, and the Black people that did work for the EMS, at first, they weren't allowed to touch the patient. They weren't allowed to do anything pretty much but observe. Kind of inclusion and diversity in EMS right after that. And he went on to rise in the ranks and got promoted pretty high up. I just think this story is amazing, man, because one, I had no clue
I
that
had
it was a bunch of
no
Black men.
idea.
Yeah. I feel like it's one of those things that you just assume has always been around. It just feels like a no-brainer. But these men were the innovators of this. And the saddest part about the story is that it feels like they were kind of shut out for years. I watched an interview with a few of these folks, and it feels like they were shut out of an industry that they helped to actually found. They're the ones that were the pioneers of this whole idea of a mobile emergency service. Um, and they kind of revolutionized emergency care and the ability to stabilize a patient for the whole country. If you think
Yeah.
think about how massive that is, man. It's it's a lot to think about. Because I'll give you another example. Like they showed an interview of a gentleman that was part of it, and his name was Mitchell Brown, and he said that um, before he became part of this, what happened was that his mother had an emergency, and he called the police because he had no other choice, and the police said, she's drunk, we're not taking her to the hospital, right? And he knew she wasn't drunk. He knew that she had fallen ill somehow. And so he drags her downstairs, he takes her, he carries her and puts her in the police van. They wind up taking her to the hospital, but they don't really help him to even take her into the van. But once he gets her to the van, they take her to the hospital. He said that she died 5 days later with cerebral hemorrhage, right?
Ah.
Now, that story is heartbreaking, but it's probably not uncommon, right? If you think about, like I said, that time period, you're talking about a Black neighborhood, you're talking about people that the only people they could depend on in an emergency to bring anybody to the hospital were either themselves, the funeral home, or the police. So you can imagine how many people may have died because of lack of like that initial triage, that initial intervention to stabilize them. That might have saved thousands of lives. But that's just one example, man. But I thought this story was fascinating. That's why I wanted to talk about it today. There's actually a book about this called American Sirens, and it's by Kevin Hazard. So if you want to learn more about the Freedom House ambulance service, it's The American Sirens is the name of the book, and the author is Kevin Hazard.
Yo, that was kind of dope to start it off, B. I had yo, shout out who? Shamika Rivera? Yo, shout out
Shamika
to you.
Rivera. Shout out to
Shout out to
Shamika
you.
Rivera.
Because I had no idea. There's your shout out. I had no idea about that. I'm mad we didn't get that for the first show. You know what I'm saying?
Well, so Shamika was telling me about this, and there's a show out called The Pit. And I think it's about an emergency room, right?
Yeah.
And it probably and it looks like it takes place in Pittsburgh, I would assume. And that's where she said that they talked about it on that show. And then subsequently she told me that there's documentaries, and she sent me an article about them. And that's where like I thought this would be a good topic to bring up. But when I read the article about them, I just thought it was an amazing story. Like and it feels like if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have the EMS as we know it today.
Dope.
And when you think about like the type of people that they grabbed, it was like I said, like it was like that second chance type of thing where you're talking about people that were considered unemployable,
Throwaway.
right?
Some in
Yeah.
society's throwaway, so to speak.
Right,
You know,
exactly. Like
people
these are
that you
people
wouldn't
from
want to entrust your life to, so to speak.
ex- exactly, exactly. So, you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword, so to speak, in terms of the story, right? Because it's a story of triumph, and it's definitely a story of legacy. But there's a little bit of me that's that's kind of sad that it took for that really huge setback um to happen for the innovation to spread across the country, right?
Right.
And that legacy was actually erased for a long time because you know people just didn't want anybody to know that it was a bunch of black people that were responsible for this innovation in large part, right?
That's cool. That's cool, man. I'm gonna look that up. Do some reading on that myself.
Definitely, American Sirens. If you want to pick up the book, anybody,
American
Kevin has it.
Sirens. There's your book.
There's
So
always a
my
book involved.
there's always a book. There's always a book involved. So my first one I was watching the news and I saw that a Spanish research center has announced that they've found a cure to pancreatic cancer. Or at least they've
Hey.
said they think that they've almost completely found a cure for pancreatic cancer. And it made me think about Henrietta
Mm.
Lacks. You know Henrietta Lacks, right?
Yeah, she has the immortal cells, right? That they
Bang,
use
there you
for
go,
yeah,
my
yeah.
man. I knew you wasn't gonna let me down, boy. That's my man right there.
I got
That
the
boy
book
know
somewhere.
that boy got a books on everything somewhere, son.
Yeah.
So Henrietta Lacks was born in 1920 in Roanoke, Virginia. She was a tobacco farmer. So she is credited now with the first, what they call the first immortal cell, which they call the HeLa cell, named after her. And a HeLa cell is an immortalized cell line that's used in scientific research. It's the oldest human cell line and one of the most commonly used in research. The line is extremely durable. That's why it's very good, because it's derived from cervical cancer cells taken from Henrietta Lacks on February 8th, 1951. She's from Baltimore County in Maryland, and this happened at the Johns Hopkins Center. Unfortunately, she passed. She ended up dying of cervical cancer in, I think, October 9th, or
Mm.
October 8th or 9th in that same year, 1951. She was only 31 years old. What makes these cells so special is the fact that they grow and divide indefinitely in a lab, while most normal cells die after a set of divisions. So this was the first find of its kind. It came from a black woman, Henrietta Lacks. She went in, she was sick. She found she had a growth on her cervix, and they found out that she contracted it from the human papillomavirus, the HPV virus, which is one of the precursors to cervical cancer in a lot of cases in women. So they found these cells, and they realized they were just multiplying, and they would not die, so to speak. They would not die, and they just can keep using them and keep using them and keep using them. Unfortunately, like I said, she did not live. She ended up succumbing to cancer, but her cells are literally immortalized. Some of the things that the HeLa cell was used for is the development of the polio vaccine, the HPV, the human papilloma vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, and it also allowed scientists to clearly see and count human chromosomes, which they were able to establish that humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and also it enabled genome mapping.
Mm.
So if you've ever signed up for 23andMe,
That's a whole nother conversation.
that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, if you sign up for
But
23andMe, we have a whole nother talk to
a whole
have.
nother
But
episode for that.
yeah.
But basically, all of this was based on the HeLa cell from Henrietta
Yeah.
Lacks, the immortal cell. They also used them in space research to find the effects of zero gravity on human cells. Now, fortunately, this cell was discovered in Johns Hopkins, but unfortunately, when scientific research is involved, money is involved.
Mm.
This also brought about informed consent, because back then it was not illegal to use someone's cells or DNA without their knowledge of it. So this was all taken without her knowledge at the Johns
Mm.
Hopkins Center. Her family has been fighting for years, and they finally settled out of court with the the Thermo Fisher Scientific Inc. in Massachusetts. They settled a non-disclosed settlement out of court, and they were one of the key manufacturers in the Helicells. So her cells have been sold throughout the country, probably even throughout the world, to fight cancers. If anyone has had a friend or a loved one that's beat cancer, it's probably because of the Helicells from Henrietta Lacks. The polio vaccination, as I said, the HPV vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, and a bunch of other vaccines that they said that the research these cells helped. So they settled out of court, and they have reached a deal in 2013 that gave them some control over how the cells can be used. And it also brought forth ethics, a lot of ethics in the medical field. What is allowed and what is not allowed in regards of patient consent. Because like I said, they made this fine, they didn't tell the family. And although a life has been lost, millions and probably even billions by now of dollars have been made in the research using these cells. There's also a book, because there's always
There is a book.
There's a book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, written by Rebecca Skloot, Skloot, and there was also a made-for-TV HBO movie about this.
Was it Oprah in that movie?
Yes, Oprah played her daughter in the movie.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was the first, but is not the only. But it was the first and the only. And it's time they have discovered other immortal cells. But this was the original. Without her, they wouldn't even be looking for immortal cells anywhere.
Right.
You know? So that's my contribution to this jam.
Yeah, that's that's one of the that's another kind of double-edged story, right? Like I was saying, like this, it's kind of it's a story with a legacy. Like there's some triumph there in terms of what was probably accomplished as a result of studying her cells, but it's also that kind of sadness that the family had to fight in order for her to get any kind of, I don't know if credit is the right word, but for her to just be recognized as the source of this is something that, anybody would want, right? And then it's really important what you said about the informed consent, right? That probably wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this story in this case.
And I, you know what? I didn't look deep into this, but now that we're talking about it, that's probably where like your donor card comes in. On the back of on the back of the driver's license, you'd have to
sign.
You'd have the donor. They were probably just collecting organs here and there, because there was also a time when people would tell you don't sign the back of your donor card because they won't try to resuscitate you.
I've heard that. That's the urban legend type of thing.
Urban legend, yeah. But
but who knows?
This probably came from this court filing on consent and ethics. So it's a sad that someone had to die, but look how many lives have been saved because of this woman's cells.
Yeah, absolutely. It's two sides to it, but there's definitely a good side to it in terms of this story. That's a good one, man. And I do have that book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I have the book, so
I don't have the book, but I did see the movie on HBO.
Yeah, because there's another book called Medical Apartheid, where I think this is mentioned, along with a lot of other history in regards to African Americans and medical innovations that have come as a result of even experimentation on African Americans throughout the years in this country. It dated all the way back to slavery. The next person I want to talk about is an innovator in American aviation. So this is the first Black woman pilot in the United States. Don't tell me did you have this one too?
I had it.
You got this one on your list?
It's an honorable mention, but yes, yeah, go ahead. Great minds, B.
Yeah, great minds thinking alike again. Bessie Coleman, American aviator. Bessie Coleman was born January 26, 1892 in Atlanta, Texas. She had a dream to become an aviator, which was sparked by her brother, actually, who had fought in World War One. She moved out to Chicago as an adult in around 1919. She moved with her brother um, to Chicago, and he told her about flight. Basically, he told he kind of sparked in her that this is something that Black people would need to do if we ever want to kind of be part of all aspects of the mainstream society. Really, he kind of got her excited about that idea, but also let her know that she would never be able to fly herself because, of course, as a Black woman, 1919, there's no way that she was going to fly because there was no school in the United States that would teach a Black woman how to fly. So eventually she decided that she would go somewhere where she could learn how to fly. Because one thing her brother told her was about his travels in Europe, that a place like France would be a place where she could go and learn, but he didn't think that that would be possible. He didn't know how excited he had gotten her. So she decided right away that that's what she was going to do, right? She was working as a manicurist, I think, in Chicago, and she
Mm-hmm.
decided that she was going to save up all her money and get herself somehow to France. And I think the story goes that a gentleman named Robert Abbott, who was a publisher at a Black newspaper called the Chicago Defender, he got wind of her and encouraged her to move to France. But he first encouraged her to learn French. So she went and learned French and moved out to France 1920. Now, in 1920, she enrolled in a flight school in France run by the Cadron brothers, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the Cadron brothers. The Cadron Brothers School of Aviation in Le Crétoy, France. Is Gaston and Renee Cadron. She received a license by June 1921 from the International Federation of Aeronautics in France. After a 7-month course in kind of a rickety biplane, as as the
Yeah.
story goes, kind of a dangerous biplane where she actually witnessed one of her fellow students crash in a bad accident, right? And the story goes that she would really be um almost paranoid about checking her plane before she would go up and fly. She flew a plane that barely had a steering wheel, used like a wooden stick for steering, and the back rudder would help it stop once she landed. Right. So I can't even imagine this, right?
Yo, I'd have
I
been
can't imagine
done.
this. Yeah, I can't imagine any of this period. Like when I think about this, Rance, any of these stories, I think to myself, like, wow, we are really spoiled and lazy and not as smart as we think we are.
Mhm.
Because when you think about the lack of resources, the amount of pushback, the sheer danger of life, you think about a Black woman taking a trip, saving all her money up, and taking a trip from the United States to France to learn how to fly, and because they won't allow Black women to learn how to fly in the United States. Her
Mhm.
brother's just come back from World War One, right? Where he's telling her about his adventures. He's telling her about what's possible in France, how they're much more kind of open to women and Black women learning these type of things, right? And then she decides to go. She learns within a year or so. She gets her license, and she comes back. She decides to come back to the United States. The Associated Press gets wind of this, and they accept her after she's had her license. So they accept her as a full-fledged aviatrix, and
Mhm.
she starts doing shows. And I think first she goes back to Europe to get advanced training from Holland, Switzerland, Germany, as well as France. So she comes back and she starts doing shows, and she makes a demand that when she's doing aeronautic shows, that she won't do the shows unless it's an integrated audience, right?
Mhm.
So, so if you think about that too, like the demand that is in the 1920s, um, it just it's just kind of amazing, right?
It
And I
also
feel
shows how good of a pilot she was too, right?
yeah,
Because
she
you can
must
make
yeah,
them
she
type
must have
of
been an
trips.
amazing pilot. Like, but
Yes.
they said that she would do all sorts of tricks. Like she could do stuff like walk on the wing. Sh like her last act that she was planning to do was like parachute out of a plane. But this story is one of those stories, like I said, that makes me feel like, wow, man, I need to get a grip, like and whatever it is I think I want to do or that I can't do, like I just need to figure it out because if people like this were doing this in their 20s, um, without fear. And I'm sure, like, I shouldn't say without fear, but like overcoming whatever fear they may have had, I should say. Because I'm sure that any sane person at that time has like some fear, or they have some idea of what the obstacles are that they're gonna face, right? Or the dangers that they're gonna face, right? Um so in 1922, she's putting on shows, and unfortunately, eventually, like this is how she actually passes away. On April 30th, 1926, she dies as a result of a practice run that she's trying to do with her co-pilot, William D. Wills, and they're working on a part of her act where she's supposed to parachute out. She doesn't wear a harness because she kind of wants to be able to move around and look for, as her co-pilot is flying, she wants to look for the perfect spot for to pull off this event. Somehow he loses control of, I think that they find out that there's like a wrench in the controls because they have been working on the plane. So the plane, she gets thrown out of it as the plane is going down.
Hmm.
William Wills crashes, and he also subsequently died because as they're trying to get him out from under the plane, I think the story goes that somebody sparked a cigarette or something like around the fumes of the
Yeah, and
wreckage,
it went up.
and it sparked a fire, and he died as well, right? Um, so in 1926, she actually dies, right? And I think she's only 34 years old at that time. And around that time as well, she had a dream of starting an aeronautics school, especially for Black people, for especially for Black women and Black men as well. Because as you could imagine, in that day and age, it's probably obstacles for Black men to get trained as pilots as well, right? Unless they're in the military. As the story goes, William J. Powell actually opened up a school in her honor, so her dream was not completely dead. But this is a person, a Black woman, that gets her pilot's license. This is before Amelia Earhart. Like they said
Yep.
that like
Yep.
Amelia Earhart will be like 2 years behind her and getting her pilot's license. So you think about it, she's a true innovator for not only Black women but all women in terms of becoming a pilot and fulfilling that dream and becoming like kind of an inspiration for folks like even like the Tuskegee Airmen and whoever out there was doing anything subsequent to that, like in terms of like flight. She's kind of the blueprint for it. She's the innovator in that sense, right? So so yeah, that's my second one, Bessie Coleman. And I don't have the book exactly. I have the book in my house, like,
Hmm.
but it's basically one of those really small not autobiographies, but biographies. It's a small. I'm sure there's other books about her, but the one I have is a really small biography about her. I don't know the exact name of it, but I know that there's several books on her. I don't have one off the top of my head right now, though.
Yeah, I had her as like my honorable mention, so I was looking her up, and it was funny because I know we were both trying to get things like nobody probably knew about. When I read that she went over there and she watched one of the other students at the school crash and she still got in that plane, I
Yeah.
was like, you better than me because she was literally flying in a rickety hang glider with a broomstick for control. So the determination, that's crazy. I'd have packed my stuff. I'd have went to see who's the first person to like drive a cruise ship or something. You know what I mean? But there was no way I would
That's hilarious.
there's no way they would have got me back at that school after that, man. So shout out to Bessie Coleman, man. 2 years before Amelia Earhart. I believe
Absolutely.
I think I read she was part Native American too. Which wasn't uncommon for us back in those days.
Hmm.
So my next person I have is Bass Reeves.
The lawman. Yeah.
He was the lawman. So
Yeah.
if you've ever seen the Lone Ranger, and most Gen Xers and people in our age group grew up with the Lone Ranger,
Mm,
Hio Silver and Tonto and all that.
right.
The Lone Ranger was actually based off of a real individual by the name of Bass Reeves, a black man born in 1838 in Crawford County, Arkansas. He was born into slavery and he escaped to freedom in 1862. And in 1875, he was approved by the U.S. Department to be a deputy marshal. And they claim that Silver the Lone Ranger is based on him because also he rode like this really light gray horse that was almost white. And that's what he was known for. They didn't say the name. They said there was no one knew the name, like if he named it Silver or whatever. But the Lone Ranger is based off of him. He was responsible for policing more than 75,000 square miles, basically by himself, of what would later be known as Oklahoma. Imagine that.
I can't imagine that.
You know, he was credited with over 3,000 arrests. And they say he always got his man, even arresting his own son at one point. Oh, he didn't play no games, man.
Yeah, that's
He
crazy.
didn't play no games. He didn't play no games. And he arrested 19 suspects in a single bust. It was like a horse thief gang or something. He arrested all 19 in a single bust. He was very effective because they said that he spoke the languages of 5 Native American tribes. So he spoke Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole. Choctaw, I hope I pronounced that right. So that's why he was so effective, and that's why he got a lot of the bounties, because he was able to maneuver through what was called the Indian Territory back then, which is now what we know to be Oklahoma. There's also a show on, I think, Paramount. I think they have 2 seasons now. It's like a documentary / show about his life and times of Bass Reeves. I grew up with the Lone Ranger thinking that he wore the black mask. He had Tonto as a sidekick. So when I found that he was actually this was actually based on a black man, said I had to put this. I mean, the first time I heard about him was about probably 5, maybe 6 years ago. I came across it reading during the pandemic, and he lived to be 71 years old. Only got shot one time, and he always got his man. They even went as far as to say that there was an outlaw woman. Her name was Bella. We'll fax over funny that later. She was a known accomplice of the Jesse James gang, and when she found out that Bass Reeves had the warrant for her arrest, she turned herself in.
Get out of here.
Word.
He's a bad man.
He's a bad mother. Shut your mouth, son. I'm talking about Bass.
Yeah. I knew about this. Like when you mentioned Bass Reeves, I knew a little bit about this only because my father has told me about this. You know, he told me about this so many times. It's one of those things he forgets. He told me already.
Yeah.
And so every year, I don't know, it's not around the same time or anything, but he finds a way to slip that in. He's like, that Lone Ranger is based on a black man. And I'm like, okay, yeah, Bass Reeves, you told me. Bass Reeves, you told me about the show. I'm like, yes, I understand. I know. Because my father's big into Westerns.
Yeah. My father as well.
Yeah.
And every time he says, I said, I know.
Yeah,
you know
exactly. Exactly.
You know who the real Lone Ranger is, right?
Exactly. The same. Yeah, the same thing. Like he does it every time. So because he's so into Westerns, he loves anything like with a lawman on a horse.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the only reason I knew a little bit about that story. But that's definitely a good one. So the last one I have is really like an honorable mention, like you were saying. And it's funny that you mentioned that Bessie Coleman may have been part Native American as well, because this kind of has definitely Native Americans are heavy into this next one, right? So just to give it some context, a couple of weeks ago, me and my family went to the International African American Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. And in that museum, there's exhibits for things that you might imagine, like the same as in Washington D.C. in that museum. There's exhibits that kind of give you information about the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, all the way up until modern times. It takes you through the civil rights movement all the way to modern times. But one thing that stood out to me is that there was a display there where they're showing like a video on a really huge wall. They're showing this video, and in the video, they're chronicling, it looks like, part of the life of a man named, his name is Damon, and I've got to pronounce this last name right. I think it's Melon Song, right? Damon Melanson. This is a gentleman from, I think, the Ninth Ward in New Orleans. And the reason that they're following him around and chronicling his life is because he's part of a group of people called the Mardi Gras Indians. And this is something, honestly, I had never heard of, right?
You're 2 for 2 with this one because I haven't heard of them either.
Yeah, so this is really interesting, right? The Mardi Gras Indians have been around since at least the 19th century. And what they do is they pay homage to not only their roots as Africans that were brought over here during slavery, but what they're really paying homage to is the Native Americans that gave refuge to escaped slaves in New Orleans. So what they do is every year they'll dress up in really, really elaborate costumes, right? I'm talking about like feathers. They'll make art out of very small and different sized beads and sequins, and they'll dress up like almost like you would imagine Native Americans, but way more like elaborate and colorful. And they have kind of
like Andre
a hierarchy.
3000.
Wow, that's a stray. All right. I get. I mean, but no more. But I'm talking about like
Melly Mel and the Grandmaster Flash in them back in the days.
Yes, but like kind of reminiscent of that, but think way more elaborate. I'm talking about huge feathers. Some of these the costumes that they create, and Rance, this takes a year for them to do. They do it every year, but it takes them almost the entire year to make these costumes, right? Like to make these outfits. Their feathers, their sequins, their beads, and they're sewing these things. Part of the culture is that they sit and they sew these things for like 300 days of the year. Like they're working on these things every single day until Mardi Gras comes, until I think it's a Sunday actually before or after Mardi Gras. Like it's not exactly on Mardi Gras, because I found out through like kind of watching this little documentary series or like this documentary that they're showing on the screen rather, that Black people were actually not allowed to go to Mardi Gras. You know, and I'm like, when you think about that, it's kind of funny to me, because not funny, but it's weird, right? Like, because I think of Black people when I think of New Orleans and Mardi Gras. I'm thinking of Black people like with the parasols and the trumpets. And we did the
jazz,
the episode on jazz. So when I think of New Orleans, I think about Black people. And I'm sure I know there's plenty of white people there, of course, but I think of like a mixture. Yeah, I think of a mixture. Like I think of like Creole people that might be mixed with not only Native Americans, but then they're also mixed with white people as well, right? I think of just like kind of a melting pot of people kind of enjoying Mardi Gras together, right? Like I think of that as a tradition where like all these people are coming together. But I found out later that this tradition kind of came out of the fact that Black people at some point, they were not allowed to celebrate Mardi Gras. So they came up with their own sort of carnival, right? And people started calling them the Mardi Gras Indians because their carnival would happen around the time of Mardi Gras, but they actually refer to themselves as Black Maskers, right? They don't call themselves Mardi Gras Indians exactly. They call themselves, they accept that term. They're not offended by it, but they really call themselves Black Maskers, right? And apparently, there's thousands of these people that kind of they see themselves as the descendants of not only the Africans that were brought over as slaves, but quite a few of them, they consider themselves as being the descendants of those Native Americans as well that gave refuge. So that's why they pay homage, right? So they said that some of these costumes, they take up to a year to create. It's basically sort of a competition too between different tribes that they created, right? They've created these tribes. And the one that they were following on this particular video was Damon Melanson, and he's considered by his tribe the big chief of that particular tribe. So these folks are competing, and they're competing in a sense of like, who's the most elaborate with their costume and who
has the best plumage.
Yes, exactly. Yes. No, perfect. Because plumage is the perfect word for it, because I gotta send you the and maybe on our video we could pop up. I don't know if we could do a pop up of some of some pictures of this somehow, or maybe on our Instagram we'll show some pictures of this. But plumage is actually the perfect word, because I'm talking about giant feathers, man. It's like in all different colors. Like some people in yellow suits, purple suits, blue, you name it. Any color you can name, there's somebody out there. And now the women have gotten more involved, so they have queens. There seems to be like a hierarchy too of like of different kind of I don't know what the right word is for it, but it's like different rankings of people in this too. Like we have something called a spy boy, which is like a scout, you know, like that would scout out the other tribes and see what's going on with the other tribes. You have like a person that holds up the flag for the chief, right? And they hold up the colors. And then you have the queen that helps to kind of lead and they said at one point the queen was more like a kind of an assistant, not as much of a leader, but nowadays like the queen is considered a leader just as much as the chief, right? And you have girls that kind of look up to them. And these costumes that they make can be anywhere from like 50 to like 100 pounds. Right?
Whoa.
Yeah, they said that they don't feel it because as they're doing their chants, like because they're taking this from African and Native American traditions, right? So they're doing chants, they're feeling the spirit of their ancestors. So in the interviews that I saw with them, they're saying that they don't really feel the weight of this until after it's all done because they're relying on like kind of the spirit to move them. They feel like they're getting assistance from their ancestors to kind of to withstand the weight of this outfit, and they don't even feel it because they're feeling the spirit of the ancestors, right? Um, it's a really powerful thing, man. Like, cause and especially the idea of paying homage, the idea of creating kind of an alternative to being shut out of Mardi Gras, which again I thought was like something that blew me away that Black people would not be allowed to in Mardi Gras.
Yeah, I
Um,
would have never thought that.
yeah, like I could not have guessed that in a million years,
Mhm.
right? But it speaks to kind of the resilience. It speaks to the way Black people find these alternative ways to unite and celebrate each other. This seems to be something like in New Orleans that people look forward to, that folks look up to these folks. It's very tedious work and hard work just to create those costumes. They celebrate each other. They compete in terms of who can make the most elaborate costume, who can dance the best, who can kind of chant and keep that energy the whole time. So I thought it was just fascinating, man. I want to learn more about it actually. And I found out later on that the Neville brothers are involved in this, right? Like this whole
Oh,
albums. Yeah, there's an album called The Wild Chupalos. I gotta do a facts over funny on it. But there's whole albums where the albums are dedicated to the music of these Mardi Gras Indians. It's a deep history, man, that I can't believe that we none of us like I don't know, nobody that I know has ever mentioned this. But it seems to be deeply ingrained in New Orleans culture. And I was just surprised that I had never heard of this before. And I once I started watching this video, I couldn't take my eyes off of it because of just the beauty of this tradition, the reasoning why they're doing it. When they interview Damon Manansan, he's saying that this saved his life. You know, prior to being a Mardi Gras Indian and kind of devoting himself to this, he was kind of in the street a little bit and kind of doing his thing. But he said that this is something that gave him a purpose, it gave him a direction, it gave him a community and a family. Um, and it just you just felt it, man. I could feel the energy as I'm watching this. Like, wow, this is actually a really tight knit community, and I see that it's a tradition that's been handed down. This has been going on since the 19th century, man, and we didn't know about this. At least you and me didn't know about it.
yeah.
And, and when you think about that type of tradition lasting this long, um, it's just amazing to me. And then they also show that Damon Melanson, not only is he a Mardi Gras Indian and a chief in his own tribe, but he's also an artist. His work is shown in like local museums in New Orleans. Like I said, like he was in a full exhibit in the museum in Charleston, South Carolina. So his work is actually spreading in terms of not only what he does in creating the costumes, but his own kind of separate thing in terms of his own arts, right? So yeah, the Mardi Gras Indians. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, man. The Mardi Gras Indians. If you want to look that up, there's documentaries on that. I don't know if there's any books. I haven't gotten too deep into it yet, but I plan to.
Wow. As the young people say, it's a vibe.
It's a vibe. It's definitely literally a vibration. No, it's literally a vibration, man. Like it's definitely a vibe.
Yeah, that's a good one. So my last one is, of course, I know you know this part. Mark Dean.
Uh,
Oh, I gotcha.
maybe.
All right.
Maybe tell me more. Maybe I don't
Mark
know.
Dean, he's
It's
still
not
alive
ringing a
too.
bell. It's not ringing a
From
bell.
Jefferson City, Tennessee. He's born March 2nd, 1957. Yeah, you know what's crazy? Like, we pride ourselves on being like unscripted and on off the cuff. But when we do these type of episodes, these are like the officially scripted, unscripted type episodes because we do so much research and writing. Like,
I do have to. You know what it is? Like I have some notes, but I try not to go into like just reading off my notes.
yeah,
So
I don't
if
care,
you
man. I'm reading straight off my
no,
notes.
like but no, but that's why you're gonna be more crisp in this episode. So I apologize to the audience. Like some of this is just my my failing. But I try to take notes, but I wasn't trying to read off my notes exactly. So I apologize to the audience in advance. But Rance is gonna make up for that by being far more crisp and succinct. So I'll let you.
Mark Dean, the co-creator and principal architect of the original IBM personal computer, the PC. Oh,
Wow, I feel ashamed that I didn't know that.
oh. He also
Got
invented
me.
the ISA, the industry standard architecture bus, which I had no idea what that was. If I didn't know, that it would have spoiled it on this episode and you would have automatically known what it was and I wouldn't have gotten the chance to surprise you on it. I would have texted
No,
you
you
and be
got
like,
me on
yo,
this one.
what is an ISA, man? So apparently it's the bus allows peripherals like printers and monitors to be hooked up to connect it to the PCs.
Right.
So Mark Dean, co-creator and principal architect of the original IBM personal computer, he holds 3 of the original 9 patents for color and monochrome adapters. So you can basically thank your color on your PC screen to Mark Dean. Yeah, he also holds more than 20 patents in total. He graduated with a BS in electrical engineering from the University of Tennessee, an MS in electrical engineering from the University of Florida International, and a PhD from Stanford. He also led the team that developed the first 1 gigahertz processor chip. So he started that power. You know what I'm saying?
This is crazy. Like I feel like I should I feel ashamed that I don't know this because as a technology person, and especially I've read books about like chips and like kind of the start of this in IBM and there's actually a book called Chip Wars that I started reading, and I feel like this name should have come up, and maybe now when I go back to that book, Mark Dean's name is going to stick out to me. But I feel like sometimes I don't when I'm reading, I'm not like taking note of all the dates and names all the time. I'm just kind of getting the main ideas sometimes. So I'm sure that now that I know this name from you, the name's gonna pop out at me the next time I read anything about like the history of chips or the history of IBM or anything like that.
And it's crazy
But
because
it's
he's
interesting.
still alive and he's only 68 years old. And
Wow.
yes, that's what surprised me because usually I saw the name when I was doing research and I was like, oh, he must be like one of the early guys. And then I looked, I said, he's still alive. You
Yeah.
know, and he's only 68 years. And in 1995, he became the first African American to be named an IBM Fellow,
Yeah.
which is apparently like it's the company's highest honor. I guess it's like the Purple Heart or the Medal of Honor of IBM. So he's a first African American man to be named an IBM Fellow. Sounds pretty prestigious all in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Say that
No,
you're
that's a
an
good one.
IBM Fellow.
That's a good one. I'm gonna look that up. I'm gonna look up Mark Dean because I want to know more now. And I'm sure he has to be named in this book that I have called
Yeah.
Chip Wars.
Yeah, especially since he created the first of the 1 gigahertz processor chip.
Yeah,
He
this
led the
this
team. He led the
yeah.
team that developed it.
Yeah, I
You
would
know?
think that he's definitely mentioned.
Yeah, so that was my last one, Mr. Mark Dean, and I got you.
Nah, that was a good one. That's a good one. That's an interesting one. That's one that I definitely want to know more.
I was feeling a little salty because I was like, Dad, he has two that I never heard of.
It's not for you to feel salty. You should be like,
and
oh,
and
you should be
no,
happy.
I'm enlightened and I'm happy that you know what I'm saying? Iron sharpens iron and steel sharpens steel, you know?
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
was like, Dad, he has two really good ones. How didn't I find these? You know what I'm saying? And so then I was like, man, he's gonna know who Mark Dean is. And I have this Mark Dean,
No idea.
and he had no
It
idea.
doesn't even ring a bell, man. Like that's
Mhm.
I feel almost ashamed, like I said. But I mean, but the other one I had, like that one about the Mardi Gras Indians, man. I felt like, wow, I don't know how that got past me. All these years, I never heard of this, and it
Yeah.
just so happened that they had that exhibit. Like I said, when we went to the museum in Charleston, and they had a big exhibit for this where they were just playing the video.
Yeah. So there y'all have it. You got some books. You got a movie reference in there too. You know what I mean? The HBO Henrietta.
We always give you
Impromptu.
something to do. We always give you homework.
We always give you homework, but hopefully you did learn something. I know I learned a couple of things that I had no idea
Absolutely.
about. So we hope that you learned a couple of things today. Maybe if you didn't, you just entertained. And this is actually officially our last episode of Black History Month. Right?
Yeah.
Did I
Yep.
got it right this time? Because last
Yeah,
week
you
I
got
didn't get it
you
right.
got you got it right this time.
And also concludes our episode 28. So shout out to our now date 28s, our day ones, and everyone in between. And as usual and as always, shout out to our day one. And you know what, Maine? Guess what?
Since we are prolific.
That's right, we are prolific. We'll be back next week with episode 29. We're almost at 30.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is
And
crazy.
one more thing, I just wanted to remind everybody once again that we are on YouTube now. So
Yes.
if you feel inclined and you just want to peep us and look at us laughing and being ridiculous and stumbling over our words or whatever the case may
Yes.
be, or you just want to see the little background that I have or whatever, if you're just curious, check us out on
Check
YouTube.
us out.
Subscribe, share, like,
Like.
comment, get our numbers up. The
Yes.
algorithm loves
Help our algorithms. Help our brothers out. Help two brothers out.
that.
Black History Month, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. You don't even have to watch the whole thing. Just subscribe.
Yeah. Tell a friend to tell a friend. It's Maiden Rants again, now on YouTube.
Yeah, now on YouTube.
So we will be back next week, same Gen X time, same Gen X place. At the moment, after the recording of this episode, your boy is about to hit the streets with the shovel.
Oh yeah. Clean up that snow.
So as we usually say, power to the podcast.
Power to the podcast.
Peace.